What is up everyone, Ethan here from the Pixel Era Productions, bringing you another Skyrim Special Edition modded build. This is a very special video because in this video, the build was done in collaboration with a fellow YouTuber, BADCompanySarge, who I'm sure you've all heard of. I could not have possibly pulled off this video with any quality without him. He uploads phenomenal content every day and is one of the best in the business when it comes to Skyrim builds, and he specializes in making them usable in legendary difficulty. Of course, this version of the build will be modded, but if you want a vanilla version of the build, head over to BADCompanySarge's channel. His video is linked in the description. But without further ado, I present to you the Skyrim adaptation of a much-loved character among the gaming community, Talion of Middle-earth. A strong warrior from a harsh land and harsh past, Talion was known as a ranger among his people, a defender of the people from invading forces of darkness. Often, he would defend the villages from invading orc tribes who would constantly try to take his land. An awful sight to behold on the battlefield, at least if you're one of his opponents. Talion the Orc Slayer has a vendetta against the Orcimer that will not be sated until all of the abominable race is deceased. In the Middle-earth games, Talion is a strong Northman, which translates nicely into the Nord race from Skyrim. Using a new mod to my builds called the Imperious Races of Skyrim mod, Talion has 3 new passive racial abilities and 1 new racial power. With the Son of Skyrim passive ability, he is resistant to frost. The passive ability, the Purge, will allow him to choose one of the 9 races to do extra damage to at levels 10, 20, and 30. This will be very useful for this particular character, as you will of course choose the Orcimer. His last passive ability, Warrior's Heart, gives him a slight damage and health increase when entering combat. The final thing Imperious adds is a new racial quest that you will get as soon as you generate your character, and when completed, the quest will yield a new racial power. This power, Avatar, grants an extremely quick stamina and magicka regeneration for a limited amount of time. Of course, Talion's Standing Stone will use the Aurora Standing Stones of Skyrim mod as usual, and Talion will use the Lord Stone for the extra resistance. With the Aurora Standing Stones mod, the Lord Stone will also grant him the Blood of King's power, allowing him to do higher damage at higher health levels, but lower damage at lower health levels. You can also use the Kneel or Be Knelt power, creating an earthquake to knock down enemies. To level up in early game though, the Lover's Stone will help you level up all your skills. Talion, unusually for a Nord, grew up in High Rock's northeastern city of Jehana, which lay in the mountains on Skyrim's border with High Rock. Being the son of one of the guardsmen, he naturally took an interest in battle techniques. All of them. He wanted to learn to use a knife, sword, bow, and how to properly maintain all these weapons. The main point of a guardsman, known to the residents of Jehana as rangers, was to defend them from the orc tribes who constantly invaded the Breton establishments. Now a man, Talion joined the Ranger Guild with his father. Old joints and ailments later plagued Talion's father, forcing him to resign from his position as captain. The rest of the town unanimously elected Talion to lead the guard. Talion became very well known throughout the village and eventually married and had a young son of his own. One winter, orc raids were noticeably more frequent, and Talion took a few other guards to investigate them at their source. Sneaking around the orc stronghold at night, they discovered that the orcs were working with a powerful necromancer. A high elf by the looks of him. His skin was so pale it shone near as bright as the moon, and his menacing black armor suggested something far more powerful than any elven conjurer. Some sort of ritual was being performed. A dead orc lay on the stone table in front of the necromancer, who looked as though he was about to raise them from the dead. Then the necromancer stopped, deliberately turning his head and looked directly into Talion's eyes. Talion and his guardsmen stood no chance. They were captured and brought into the stronghold, and Talion realized with horror who they were dealing with. Menamarco, Black Necromancer, and King of Worms, servant of the Daedric Lord Molag Bal. Talion and his guardsmen were held down by the orcs, and before anything could be done, Menamarco had plunged his dagger into Talion's chest, sacrificing him to the Lord of Damnation. Talion woke up. The place was cold. Everything seemed bleak.
"Welcome to Cold Harbor,"
a voice spoke next to him. There was the spirit of a high elf, his face disfigured on one side, standing next to him. No, this wasn't any high elf he had seen before. It was an Ayleid, the ancient race who had once ruled over Tamriel.
"This is Molag Bal's horrible plane of oblivion. Many have been sent here of late, but you seem different. Perhaps we can help one another."
And so it was that Talion was guided back through Cold Harbor by the Elf Lord's spirit, completely powerless in the Daedric realm, and made his escape back to Mundus. When he awoke in the stronghold, it was abandoned. There was no Elf Lord to be seen. Suddenly, it felt as though something was trying to wrench itself from his very soul. His body turned a ghostly, transparent way, and everything seemed dimmed in shadow. Talion had merged with the Elf Lord who had helped him escape. He had now become what he hated most, an undead creature known as a wraith, a sort of half-lich. But this wouldn't stop Talion. He knew that the orcs must have left to raid his village. Talion bolted towards Jehanna, aided by the speed of the Elf Lord, and even so, he did not reach it in time. The village was burning and bodies were strewn across the path. Talion rushed to his family home and found it surrounded by orcs. He fought them off with a series of dizzyingly fast and precise blows from his blade. Half of the orcs were felled in seconds. But then, there he was again, like a shadow emerging from the smoke, Manamarco. Talion swung a wide arc and struck the Worm King, but the necromancer raised his own blade, which gleamed like an obsidian shard in his hands. Talion's blade shattered against it, the hard steel splintering like wood. He was caught by both shoulders and held fast, even as his wife and son were held in a similar manner. Talion looked on in horror as the evil black tooth that Manamarco wielded slit the throats of his family, and then it came to his own. He felt the Elf Lord inside him struggling, but now Talion embraced death. He felt the darkness close around him, only to wake back up once more. The ground underneath him shuddered, but he realized he wasn't on the ground at all. He was on a cart. A man blabbered on about the Stormcloak raid, and he realized he was bound for Skyrim. So at this point, you will take a hand in Talion's story. Talion, supremely lost and confused, will discover that he is in the 201st year of the Fourth Era and witnesses Alduin's attack on Helgen, barely escaping with his life. He will discover that Manamarco has been long since defeated and a new threat arises in the form of Alduin, the World Leader. After fulfilling his role as Dragonborn along with the Wraith and killing Alduin in Sovngarde, the Dragonborn DLC would be the next logical step for Talion. At some point, he will also need to side with the Imperials and drive out the Stormcloaks. The main reason for this is so that you can get the clothes of Ulfric Stormcloak to fit the aesthetic of the character, but this can easily be justified in the context of the character given Talion's past as a soldier and warrior. The Imperial side of the Civil War is the only quest that's actually mandatory, but the others that I mentioned are highly recommended. As usual though, anything you can justify within the context of the role-playing is completely viable. Before we move on to the role-playing and playstyle, I would like to issue a fair warning. This build is extremely tough. It is not for the faint of heart, but should offer a nice and fresh challenge for seasoned Skyrim players, and even then you might struggle on higher difficulties. Talion is a generally good-hearted man, but is very concentrated on his goal, whatever it may be at the time, so it's unlikely that he will be very distracted by side quests and such. With interacting with characters, Talion likes to keep things brief. He's gone through trials harder than most, and that in turn has left him hardened as well, so he likely won't engage in touchy-feely or unnecessarily lengthy conversations. Essentially, Talion will mind his own business whenever he can help it. As for a playstyle and combat, Talion has a very wide variety of skills at his disposal. He's an illusion mage of some skill, which connects very well with the wraith aspect of Talion's character, and he is also a master swordsman, ranger, and assassin. In combat, it's best to try to get a few sneak kills in first with your bow and dagger. Then try to hang back and eliminate enemies with your bow, even once they've noticed you. Finally, rush into combat with your sword, but be prepared to try to block and dodge almost all attacks. Essentially, thin the numbers as much as you can before enemies come within melee range, then fight them off with your sword. If you find yourself overwhelmed, which is easy to do with the low armor rating of this character, illusion magic and the bend will shout can help you shape the battlefield more into your favor. Keep in mind that part of Talion's story is that he is immortal, so save often as you can on a particular creature or boss multiple times. A big part of the Middle-earth games is the Nemesis system, and though there is no such system in Skyrim, you can roleplay your own Nemesis system and get a similar effect. Now we move on to the more technical bits of this build with the skills. The main skills for this build are Sneak, Archery, One-Handed, Block, Enchanting, and Illusion. Sneak is going to play an essential role in this build as it will help you thin the numbers out before combat, allowing the fight to go more into your favor. The skills I took from this tree were Sneak Mastery, Infiltrator, Sneak Attack, Assassin's Blade, and Backstab. There are no specific perks that really need mentioning here, but they were all taken generally to improve your chances of getting melee stealth kills on enemies. Enchanting is a crucial skill to this build, as it will help boost certain skills and attributes, but also because it helps simulate the rune system found in the Middle-earth games. This system essentially allows you to carve certain runes into your weapons and give them different effects, similar to enchanting in Skyrim. The perks that I took from this tree were Enchanting Mastery, Soul Siphon, Thunderstruck, Gem Dust, and Regalia. There are a couple perks that deserve special mention here, including Thunderstruck, which is very helpful because it allows you to deal extra fire damage on power attacks with your weapon, and this will be extremely useful since your sword is going to be enchanted with fire damage. Regalia also deserves special mention as it allows you to create higher level enchantments on clothing and jewelry. Illusion is really fun and important for this particular build because it helps simulate the wraith effects that you get in the Middle-earth games, such as mind control. The perks for this particular build will be Illusion Mastery, Commanding Presence, Dream Thief, Kindred Mage, Fickle Fate, and Master of the Mind. The perk that really deserves special mention here is the Commanding Presence perk, which is going to be really important as you will have an orc follower with you at all times. The Commanding Presence helps simulate the presence of the Elf Lord, and it boosts allies with 20% more attack damage and 20% more chance to critically hit any opponent. The rest of these perks just basically boost your mind control spells, which we'll review later. Arguably your main weapon will be your sword, and so it is obvious that the one-handed skill tree will be essential for the build. The perks here are One-Handed Mastery, Disciplined Fighter, Clash of Champions, Crosscut, Falling Sword, and Windswept. These last few perks were chosen because they boost your damage through certain types of power attacks. For example, Crosscut boosts damage from sideways power attacks. This helps simulate the more strategic playstyle in combat that you see in the Middle-earth games, and forces you to think a little more to deal higher amounts of damage. Disciplined Fighter just takes down the stamina cost of power attacks so you can use them more. Block is another thing to take, mainly to increase the strategy required in combat, as the two main perks you'll be taking from this tree are Block Mastery and Quick Reflexes. Quick Reflexes is definitely the essential perk here, as it will allow you to slow down time and easily dodge power attacks while blocking. This is very important because the inherently low armor rating of this build makes it difficult to sustain large amounts of damage, and if you're constantly being slammed with power attacks, you're going to die extremely quickly. So make sure you put this perk into good use as often as possible. The final skill for this build is going to be Archery, and the perks from here will be Archery Mastery and Crippling Shot. Crippling Shot will allow you to stagger enemies that are charging at you within 25 feet, which is very important as it allows you to get a little bit of extra damage in as well as extra time to maneuver around the battlefield. The Steady Hand perk is often essential for all builds that use archery, but for this particular one it's not necessary, as the Slow Time Shout will essentially do the job for you. Spells and shouts will play an essential role in allowing you to experience the Wraith-type playstyle that you get in Middle-earth and translate it into Skyrim. The spells are all going to be illusion spells, and they include Fury, Calm, and Fear. Now these are obviously the novice versions of these spells, and as you level up, you can buy more and more powerful versions of these spells to affect higher level enemies. There are 3 shouts from Skyrim that do a really good job of translating some of the most fun abilities from the Middle-earth games into Skyrim. First of them being the Ice Form Shout. Certain abilities in the Middle-earth games allow you to freeze enemies temporarily when dodging over them, so the Ice Form Shout does a really good job of simulating that. Slow Time simulates the slow-mo effect that happens when you draw your bow, and the Bend Will Shout simulates the mind control ability that you have as the Wraith in the Middle-earth games. Now we just have a few final things to go over for this build. As for followers and mounts, an orc follower fits very well with Talion's role-playing in Shadows of Mordor and Shadows of War, as one can achieve the Bodyguard perk, which will allow an orc to follow them around and protect them. A good option for an orc follower is Gorbash the Iron Hand, but any others will do fine. Having a follower is great because he or she will be able to take a lot of hits for you, and as this character has little to no armor, this will be extremely useful. As for a mount, you can use a mod that I linked in the description below to allow you to get a Death Hound as a mount. This nicely simulates the idea of a Caragor, which can be dominated by Talion in Shadows of Mordor. Housing is unnecessary for this character, but gear certainly is. As for armor, the main piece for this build will be Ulfric Stormcloak's clothes with a Fortify Health enchantment. I chose this purely for the aesthetic. Keep in mind that you will need to join the Imperial Legion to get these clothes. He will also use steel-cuffed gauntlets enchanted with the Fortify one-handed enchantment, and vampire boots with Fortify Sneak. No helmet will be required for this build. Keep in mind that all these were chosen purely for aesthetic reasons and not for any armor rating at all. Protection in battle will be covered by health enchantments and the bonus from the Lordstone. Additionally, a necklace enchanted with Fortify one-handed and a ring enchanted with Fortify Magicka will greatly boost Talion's power in combat. The main weapon for this build will be Strider's Sword, a one-handed sword from a mod listed in the description below. This sword fairly well matches the aesthetic of Ufrael, the sword of Talion in the Shadows of Mordor and Shadows of War games. This sword will be enchanted with a flame damage enchantment. And that covers absolutely everything you need to know in order to bring Talion of Middle-earth into Skyrim. As usual, all the mods, both required and optional, are listed in the description, as well as links to their respective Bethesda.net pages. And of course, BADCompanySarge gets a vast part of the credit for this build. As I've said, if you'd like to see a vanilla adaptation of this particular build, the link to this video is in the description. He puts out content including videos on both Skyrim and the Middle-earth games, so I would highly recommend checking him out and certainly subscribing to his channel. But apart from all that, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did indeed enjoy this video, please don't forget to show your appreciation with a like, and certainly leave a comment with your feedback. I'll get back to you on those as soon as possible. Again, thank you so much for watching. This has been Talion from Middle-earth. I've been Ethan from the Pixel Era Productions, and I will see you in another video.